Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, coast to coast, website thisweekinamerica.us. Thomas Miller has been a student of Unarius since he was 14 years old, at that time meeting Ernest L. Norman, the founder and teacher of Unarius. Tom has given many lectures on Unarius principles over his 56 years of study. A frequent media guest, he has been featured in a documentary film. He also has written several books about Unarius principles, including a book of verse, The Epic, and a series of lectures, which was published in the book The Keys to the Universe. Tom maintains a website, unariansunited.com, that features Dr. Norman's teachings as well as student testimonials and discussions. With a degree in science and accounting, Tom is the owner of tax accounting firm in Portland, Oregon. The website, once again, is unariansunited.com. We'll mention that throughout the program. You can link on directly to that website by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Back with us on the program, Thomas Miller. Tom, welcome back to the show. It is always great to have you here, and this is going to be an exciting program today. A lot to cover. Welcome back.
Oh, a lot to cover. It's very nice to be here with you, Rick.
We've got a number of questions from listeners and viewers from the last program. We'll get to those in a couple of seconds, and I thought it makes some sense here in the beginning just to lay a little groundwork. If you're listening to the program for the first time, we're talking about unariansunited.com, the principles of Unarius, as you learned from Dr. Ernest Norman. Give us a little bit of background, set the stage for what we're about to discuss during the course of the program today.
Okay, Rick, today we're going to be speaking of Dr. Ernest L. Norman's teachings, which brings forth the necessary principles to help us understand our relationship to the infinite intelligence, which most people call God. He gave these teachings, many times on tape recording, which are preserved and generated on our website, unariansunited.com, and are free to anyone so interested. There's no cost. He gave these explanations between 1954 to 1971 when he left this earth plane. A little bit about the God relationship that we are speaking about. Many people say God is within me, God is directing me, God is somebody out there as another being, an all-knowing, all-seeing being that is coming into my life, and I accept him. Well, our concept is that God is not within us, God is us. And we use that concept when we start describing energy. We start describing how all of the atoms in our body, we have trillions and trillions and trillions of atoms in our own body. These are the expressions of the infinite itself. These atoms are expressing energy patterns that is the mind, the actual mind of the infinite intelligence. And we are expressing in our mind the infinite intelligence, which is what people call God. And so we are what Nietzsche used to call man is God becoming, which means that through an evolutionary process, we evolved into a more intelligent, reasoned being and are evolved into higher dimensions of understanding and love and harmony. And so this is the way the infinite intelligence expresses through us. So we are the actual sum and substance of God itself. So there's no separation. We have to just understand that and work with the principles. There's various principles of how the infinite works. And in our own particular third dimensional science, we are learning and we are discovering how this great infinite works in this physical dimension, this universe we call. And the planet Earth is just totally trillions and trillions and trillions of atoms, and they're all made up of expressionary elements. Each atom we find has a particular intelligence. We call it a particular element, but that element is expressing itself from a vortex, what we call a vortex, which is a circular maelstrom of energy which is being demodulated from other and higher dimensions down into this world. And this is why there is speculation in the science world that they're finding that there are no particles, there is only forces. Even the atom, when they split the atom apart, they're finding no marbles, they're finding no solid forms. They're finding simply forces that are interacting with each other through a frequency relationship and a harmonic attunement where they're generating various energy patterns, and which we call atoms. Now we accumulate that all together into our third dimension, and we look at walls, we look at other people, we look at our own body and the expression there. Uh, that understanding is, or should be, begun to learn that this is the God force working, and this is the principle of God, how God or the infinite intelligence expands, becomes more infinite in nature. When we talk about infinity, we must talk about finite also, because to be infinite, you need to be finite
Right,
also. So the
right.
third dimension is actually the finite part of the infinite. Okay, so when we look out into the universe, we see the infinite totally in great complex masses and movements,
Yes.
energy propagations into this world. However, we are finding now that there are virtual relationships. And there's some scientists that are theorizing that this world is a hologram, or this is a illusionary world, which is actually true. The reality that we inspect or generate in our own lives is a mind made up by ourselves. We are generating our own reality. The infinite is just uh, generating the necessary platform for us to do that. And so, as we go through our evolution, we learn these principles, we start to work with them, and then we start to enter into various higher states of consciousness. Uh, Dr. Norman called these lessons and concepts Unarius, which is an acronym, and it was coined by him for Universal Articulate Interdimensional Understanding of Science. There's some operative words there. Interdimensional, which we were just discussing,
Yes.
is that there are infinite number of universes or infinite number of dimensions. Now, a dimension is a certain set of uh, states of consciousness or intelligence or relationships that various beings have evolved into living. So when we talk about the higher worlds, we talk about angels, and a lot of people in the past have visualized or seen these higher beings come to them in their mind and in relationship. And so what they've seen is this great, beautiful light and this aura. And because of their primitive mind, they could not conceive, because these beings were flying around and levitating and not have the feet on the ground. So they thought that, oh, okay, if they're doing that, they must have wings. And I see this beautiful light around them, so they got to be wings. Because hey, you cannot fly without wings. That's all there
Exactly.
is to
Yes.
it. And so, all the birds have wings, so and I can't fly. So, even Leo da Vinci,
Da Vinci. Yes.
Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, I'm sorry. Said that you got to have wings. So he built a flapping contraption
Yes.
with wings. So, and he didn't make too much of an off the ground relationship there. Anyway, so we see these things in our own relationship, and we interpret them in our own state of evolution or our own state of consciousness at any particular time. Uh, Dr. Norman also speaks of principles of the infinite expressing itself in these vortexes, which are demodulated from these higher frequencies worlds or strata. So we're actually being the culminating point of these great vortexes which are being demodulated from these other worlds. They're actually being filtered down. These higher intelligences are filtered down, and this is how we perceive in this third dimension our own consciousness. We'll speak about consciousness a little bit later. He also speaks of a great spiritual organization, which are made up of literally thousands of more advanced souls who reside in these invisible worlds, which are sometimes referred to as heaven. Well, yeah, this is just a concept which we had come up with because of our visions and our preconditioning understandings of our trips to these higher worlds, where we saw these great luminous cities.
Yes.
And I just want to show you these beautiful luminous cities.
And if you're listening to the audio version of this, I encourage you to go to the website, thisweekinamerica.us, go to videos, and you will see the interview with Tom and the visuals that he's talking about. We're doing the recording by Skype video. Or you can go to
Right
YouTube and put it in. Yeah, that's just very amazing.
This is the splash page when you go to Unariansunited.com.
Okay.
And then you can go to all of his teachings, where he actually speaks the teachings, and in other times he has transcribed into books. But it's all there on the website. All of his teachings are there on the website. Okay?
And the website is Unariansunited.com, Unariansunited.com. And, of course, you can link on directly if you can't remember that or the spelling. Go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, a link there, and you can go directly to Unariansunited.com. Tom, I love that picture.
Isn't it great?
Yes.
It's a painting that somebody was inspired. They went there psychically or spiritually or in their sleep, and they remembered that, so they try to reproduce it. So this also is a remembrance. This is where these two lighted souls are in a setting of the Grecian type. And so there's many infinite relationships in the higher worlds that these cities, higher cities, crystalline cities, if you want to call them, or however you want to conceive of them, they are worlds which you go to in your sleep and in between earth lives, where you learn these principles, and then you come back down here, incarnate, and you want to try to reproduce them and use these principles in your daily life. This is our mission, actually, as human beings in an evolutionary process.
With us on the program is Thomas Miller. We're talking about the principles of Unarius. His website is unariansunited.com. And a few minutes, we'll be talking about taking some listener questions. If you have any questions for Tom for his next visit to the program, you can get a hold of us by going to thisweekinamerica.us. You've got a column there where you can, an icon where you can click that on and contact us. Or you can go to Tom's website, unariansunited.com, and mention that this is a question for his discussion on the radio program. Tom, didn't mean to interrupt there. I just wanted to give a little information so people knew who you were and how to contact you, because I'm sure they're fascinated by the discussion, what you're talking about. And what's so fascinating with this is your background in science. What you're describing is all scientifically backed, isn't it?
Yes. In fact, what we have, it's ironic, is that the third dimensional science, or the scientists in this world, are discovering how the infinite works in this dimension. And so all of these intricate concepts that the scientist is finding, he didn't make it up, or he didn't generate it.
Yes.
Faraday learned about electromagnetism by experimentation. He didn't make it up. He just was inspired to discover these principles. And so these higher beings, I just want to get back to them, through their evolution, they have and are expressing a more developed relationship with the God force. And their total desire is to help and guide and protect us through our initial learning phase as we find ourselves on this earth. And so Dr. Norman's works are essentially focused on the individual self-betterment program. This is what Unarius is really nuts and bolts about. It's about the individual. Dr. Norman always speaks that it's always an individual proposition in life. And then he goes in to describe, and I would recommend you detailing the teachings, what we're speaking about now on the website, that he says that the uh, energy being, the spiritual being, is us. We are spiritual beings. We're not just physical beings. This is where the scientist has cut off their understanding. They refuse to go into these higher worlds, and so now what they see, they're actually puzzled by many of the things which they're discovering because they don't make sense in his mathematical world. Like, for instance, a black hole. Black hole actually terminates into what they call a singularity. Now, a singularity means that there's no oscillation or no dynamic movement going on. Well, that is contrary to all mathematical formula. It just blows them away, because what they have now in a singularity is an indeterminate answer to all of their equations. In other words, they have that side figure 8, that's called the infinite sign,
Oh, yes.
infinity, and they just are driven crazy by that because they can have 10 blackboards on one side of the equation. It doesn't matter, all of the algebra and calculus they want, but when they get an infinity sign, it says there are no answers and there are all answers. In other words, any number that you plug in there, it's an answer. So they can't have that. And so they're puzzled by the source of all of this things which they're discovering, and inside the atom and inside the greater macrocosm of the universe. They're finding stuff out there that are just unbelievable in their generation of energy. Energy is a force. We got to remember that. It is not a particular thing which sometimes the scientist calls that it has a potential to do work. And so when you have a ball, like Galileo went up on the Pisa and dropped the ball in the feather,
Yes.
and you drop that ball down, while it's going down, it is expending work. And so when it hits the ground, it's finished the work. So that energy then is stopped. But that's how the third dimensional scientist sees energy. But energy has a much more comprehensive relationship to the entire infinity. And so in discussing that, Dr. Norman goes into detail in describing these things and translating them for us so that we can understand ourselves, our own mental function, and he explains to us how we operate, both physically and psychically. He uses the third dimensional science, which is the finite part of the infinite, as a beginning point, but goes much further. He generates knowledge that he goes into these higher worlds, how they work, and what their relationship is to the overall evolutionary process and understanding of infinite intelligence. He describes these multidimensional worlds and their function in the grand scheme of evolution as expressing in large and small vortexes, which are cyclic in nature. Now, that's a very important concept. In the third dimension, everything is unidirectional. In other words, you have a ray of light. It goes from one point to another point, and now the scientists said, well, it can't go more than 186,272 miles per second. Well, that is a particular point in this dimension that the infinite is operating on. But what they don't see is the unseen worlds of the infinite, which are infinite in nature. That word infinite is really incomprehensible to us, but we must try to learn that concept and expand on our relationship to that concept. But where in these cycles where time is integrated into each cycle and regenerates each time the cycle starts over. And so what we have there is a timeless dimension, whereas in this dimension, it's a beginning and an ending. And this is what we think. Okay, the universe is going to disappear someday, which is ridiculous concepts out of ignorance. Is that they don't see the entire universe even. Even in this third dimension, they're limited in their understanding. Of course, even they'll admit that.
Yes.
So there's many things which are not congruent to the explanation of the universe, like the Big Bang. Don't go along with the Big Bang. Dr. Norman says that's a ridiculous idea, because there you have again a singularity, but you don't have anything else around it. So where did it come from, and how is it a singularity, which is against all mathematical understanding of our relationship to life? But we adhere to that now. It's becoming gospel to the earth scientists. But they even admit that they don't know where that singularity came from and why it exploded.
Yeah.
So that's ridiculous relationship. It is the infinite, which is always infinite, and that means that it is beginningless and timeless. It is endless. And so we need to understand that relationship within our own studies. In the fact that time is integrated into each cycle, we need to understand how each cycle is energy patterns. They are waveforms in a cycler manner installed in or imbued in our psychic anatomy through our experiences. Every time we think a thought, that thought goes into our psychic anatomy. And that energy being or spiritual part of ourselves is timeless. And when you think a thought, it just doesn't go out there and dissipate. It actually goes there as a living force in our own energy body. That is part of our development. As we go through these experiences, we start to reincur them, and we start to learn to imbue them with a higher nature of themselves. And therefore, when you integrate those two energies, you become more highly developed.
Right.
Because now what you've done is generate that negative energy, the negative experience, into wisdom. Now, the higher beings, or any being that has come here, which is the higher nature, reincarnated, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Zoroaster, these people taught us these teachings. So Dr. Norman's teachings is nothing new. There's nothing new under the sun, as they say.
Exactly.
In God's beautiful interdimensional universe. And so these teachings have been only updated by Dr. Norman into the idiom of our scientific time. He is inculcating these concepts, or relating these concepts as our psychic anatomy, our spiritual body, our higher self. Whatever you want to call it, or have they called it the small still voice? Is our conscience is coming directly from our super consciousness, which is part of our soul, which is an abstract extraction of this great infinite intelligence. So within each of us, we have the infinite intelligence necessary for an infinite evolution. So what we do is we make the super consciousness in a personal relationship through an evolution of our experiences, and essentially in these cycles in our psychic anatomy, they are made up of intelligent experiences, both negative and positive, from our past lifetimes. The scientists, the psychiatrists will go back to the beginning of our birth, and they do have that knowledge that, the things which make us unhappy or sick is actually derived from our present lifetime. But we go back into past lifetimes also. Because when you see a person born in this world, you see these beautiful prodigies. At 2 and 3 years old, they're playing piano, generating concerts, and being scientifically aware. I knew a 14-year-old when I was young that came into the science, and he had an IQ that they could not measure. It was off the scale.
Wow.
And he was studying the encyclopedia at 2 years old. He knew calculus at 3 years old, and stuff like that. I mean, he didn't just get that from genes or DNA. We can go into that too. Is the DNA is actually a relationship that the psychic anatomy, or the soul, generates as a mental construct of what is happening in his or her psychic anatomy before he's born or she is born. And they combine with the parents' particular oscillations from their own past relationships, and that's how the DNA is formed. Now that DNA is got all of those experiences that the person has generated from his past lifetimes and brings that forward into our present lifetime. And we talk about past lives, and then we have to bring in the word karma. Karma has actually been misunderstood, both basically from the Eastern philosophies and then bringing them to the West to some degree, or they've been misinterpreted by the who the masters brought that term forward. So karma is actually, we can bring it into focus by saying it is actually living the earth life. The entire relationship of the earth life is karma. And it is what the yogi call it the wheel of karma. When we get intelligent
Yes.
into a more highly developed, reasoned relationship with the infinite, then we get off the wheel of karma. And this is what Buddha called nirvana. And so we go through all of these past life experiences, and I can just relate one past lifetime that I had. I lived in northern India, and I was an urchin, and I roamed the streets and ate garbage out of the back alleys and slept in the streets. Well, that was such a terrible lifetime. I died when I was 9 years old. Now, this was related to me by Dr. Norman, who gave many thousands and thousands of readings, which came true. And so I have a terrible distaste for India, not necessarily for the people, but it's just that relationship that tunes me in
Yes.
to those relationships. So this can be extrapolated for anybody who's thinking about who they are, why they are reacting to various things in their life. They are coming in contact with relationships from their past, meeting people from their past, and you can just analyze your own lifetime. You can see when you meet people, you have an instant like or an instant dislike for them, and you don't know why. And sometimes they have to say one word before you say, I don't like that person.
Exactly. Yes.
Or I love that person. And so these relationships are built from these past lifetimes that are imbued or part of our what we call psychic anatomy, our energy body, which resides in these higher worlds. Now, it's very important for us to understand how the mechanism is operating when we say we're reliving our past lifetimes. A lot of people say, well, why don't I remember a particular lifetime? Why don't I remember that? And so to say to that, you are remembering. Everything you do is a memory. And you're just bringing that memory forward in the now in a different relationship or facet of that experience. So you're reliving it, regenerating it, and like we said, these energies or experiences are operating from the psychic anatomy, which is timeless. It's in cyclic motion, and the cycle will come around and finish. It'll start all over again. So we will come in contact with these relationships or these experiences time and time again, life after life, until we start to understand the principles and how to heal ourselves from these negative attributes or negative experiences. Right. And how we do it is we have to start analyzing those simple principles of frequency relationship, harmonic attunement, cyclic motion. All of those concepts are very important as a base foundation. Now, speaking of that, we have to deal with the idea of how consciousness comes about. Now, we talk about the brain, and we have done that in previous discussions. Now, the brain is simply a transceiver. It is not the seat of intelligence or consciousness. It is a mechanism where it translates all of the stimuli that's coming in from the world through our five senses. So, and then it translates it into the psychic anatomy, steps it up, and that energy then is harmonically attuned to like nature vortexes or energy patterns, and then they then are regenerated and then step down where the brain then now receives this information, and that closed circuit condition is what we call consciousness, and we call it our mind. Now, the five physical senses are very, very straightforward, where we have the stimuli, and these are the senses that generates this reaction to this earth world, and also makes our physical world what we call our reality. Now, everybody has their own idea of what is reality.
Yes.
A lot of people are pretty much far out in their reality. But it is their reality generated from their own experience structure, and how many actually integrated, or there's something.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thomas Miller is our guest on the program. Unarians United is the website. And if you're fascinated by the discussion as I am, you will go to the website. You'll get a lot of great information there. The pictures that we talked about that Tom has been showing. We've got about 4 or 5 minutes left in the program, and we're covering a lot of things that you had questions on after Tom appeared on the last program. Tom, I'll let you pick up with that. It's fascinating. And again, all of the information, science-based, and you'll find on Tom's website, which is unariansunited.com. Fascinating discussion so far.
Okay, thank you. This is the teachings, and we recommend that people, if they want to drill down to the details of what we're talking about, go to our website where Dr. Norman actually teaches this and goes into details. When we talk about the brain again, the five physical senses are incepting this information, and it is generated into consciousness through the psychic anatomy as the particular force. So there is no real learning, there is no real activity in the third dimension without this psychic anatomy. You cannot have a closed circuit condition if you only have a singularity, which we just discussed earlier, and that would mean that the brain was in the singularity format if we did not incorporate that oscillation between the psychic anatomy and the physical anatomy. One time I had a little discussion at a junior college with about 15 psychiatrists and psychologists, and we discussed these principles about the psychic anatomy and that relationship with the brain. And after the discussion, one of the psychiatrists says, "Oh, this is fascinating stuff, and I think it's really got validity. But what I really need to know is specificity. I need to know where in the brain that is that engine that tells everybody, how to operate their brain." Now, we see the brain as electrical activities, but we don't know where that energy source comes from. So you tell me the specificity area, or the specific area of the brain. And I said, wait a minute. We just discussed that that seat of intelligence is not in the brain.
Well, exactly, yes.
And so it was kind of amusing that the psychiatrist, even after all that, and he was fascinated, did not have that understanding and wanted to keep into the third dimension, which we can never really finalize our understanding of life itself until we generate these higher spiritual concepts into our mind. Now, another thing too is we cannot stop our emotions. I had a meeting or a lunch with one of the students at one time, and he says, "I got to stop these anger feelings. I've got to stop these emotions." And I said, whoa, wait a minute. You are not able to stop them. You don't have the ability to stop them. because what they are, what you're experiencing, is who you are. So you cannot deny who you are. The whole idea of Unarius science is to recognize those emotions at the time that they are being experienced, and at that time the principles say that all energy regenerates, and it is dynamic and oscillating in various forms and generations, and it changes. Every thought changes these vortexual relationships to the entire superconsciousness and the subconscious or mental consciousness. So in the change, you have to have recognition, a realization of what is happening while you're going through these emotions, not after the fact, because you can say, well, I got emotional today, but I'm really good tonight, so that emotion is gone away from what I did today, and I really got through it, that type of thing. The whole idea is to recognize it at the time that it shows itself on the surface of our consciousness.
That's really fascinating, and we're out of time, unfortunately, on this program. But that's a great place to pick up with the next program. You've answered some of the questions that we had people submit after the last appearance on the program, and we encourage you, after this enlightening, fascinating, illuminating discussion that we've had on today's program, you may want to go back and listen to it a couple times to pick out particular points and make sure you've caught all the concepts that Thomas was talking about. But if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us. You can do that by, of course, going to thisweekinamerica.us comment section. Those questions will come to me. I will pass them along to Tom. Or you can go directly to his website, which is Unariansunited.com. That's UNARIANS, Unariansunited.com. Fascinating, the pictures that we described on the program today. You'll see, as we did this by Skype video, when you go to YouTube, you go to our two different websites, you'll be able to see those. You'll see those specifically at Tom's website. A lot of great information there. It's a two-way. You can ask questions. A lot of your questions will already be answered by when you start looking at the website. Tom, as always, this has been, I'm saying, enlightening. It really was today. Thank you for being with us on the program. We look forward to having you back. There's so much more that we can touch on. Thank you for giving us some good background today on exactly what it is, the concept we're talking about. And again, the new website is Unariansunited.com. Tom, thank you for being with us on the program.
Thank you very much, Rick, for having me.
It was,
and we'll talk later.
It was fascinating, and we want to have your input, and we'll get that off to Tom for future programs. Once again, the website, Unariansunited.com. You'll find it all in a direct link by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You're listening to This Week in America, and we're back right after these messages. Don't go away.